So Emma, we went through so many technical topics. Uh, well, first, maybe I would like to know how a bit more about your visit to Paris. Do you like Paris?
I love Paris.
Yeah.
I like
You've
any
been here
excuse to
before,
come
right?
back. This is my third time.
Third time.
Yeah.
And you still like it?
I still like it because it was less touristy of a visit this time. Like, I didn't go and do, all the museums, and I have already done those things. It was really fun to be in a new neighborhood and just try to live the people
live
here.
Paris.
Yeah.
No, it's, when I started being in Paris, actually I didn't go to I didn't go to these kind of famous places and all of that. I love that kind of feeling of living in the city, being
that's why
in
I
the city.
prefer Airbnbs in general.
Yeah, it's nice. So and like, is it different from other cities? I mean, I know that you've been around. You travel a lot for conferences and
yeah, and I feel too that moving to Europe this is so sad to say, but it does kind of take the magic of going on a big trip to Europe out of the equation. So like living in Germany, I don't feel like I live in a foreign country. It just feels like home. And so it's harder for me to travel to new places and feel that sense of awe. But I will say on this trip, like, I forgot how grand the architecture here is. And that was really inspiring for me to feel that again. So
yeah, it's very interesting to see like the whole environment completely changing.
Yeah.
The architecture, the streets, people,
right.
How they move, how they communicate. It's like a completely different thing.
Yeah.
I was looking always it's interesting from the outside, and to see, like, for instance, you are someone that is you're followed on Twitter. You have you have a lot of followers on Twitter. Not followed. But more than 60K. Like, I don't know how many today they are.
Yeah.
And that's a lot. And I don't know, what does that mean for you as a one being having so many followers? What does it mean exactly? What's the impact it has on you, and what does it mean to be in that kind of position?
A couple of things. So on the positive side, I've gotten a ton of amazing opportunities that I otherwise would not have the privilege of doing. I get to travel for conferences. I get to come do things like this.
Is it the conferences that brought followers, or is it the followers that are bringing conferences?
Followers that brought conferences.
Okay.
Yes, absolutely. It was only once I started gaining several thousand at that point that conferences would contact me to speak, which is unbelievable, and I'm so grateful for that. I get to meet a lot of incredible people and see.
Yeah, conferences are great for that.
Yeah. On the negative side, you constantly feel like you have to be producing. And I think in the beginning of my journey, so it's been a year, and I think I gained 65,000 followers in 1 year, which is totally ridiculous. I have a blog post about it if you want to see my stats and kind of how that progressed. But that's not normal. And so there were a lot of things that were really hard to deal with. One of which is I had to be more intentional with how I interact with social media, because I was always on my phone. I think there was a time when I was like 8 hours a day on my phone, which I do think contributed to building an audience, but at the expense of my mental health. People feel entitled to your time and to know exactly what's going on with you. And if you don't post for a day or two, people will message you asking, like, what's going on? Like, what's happening in your life right now? What are the negative things that you're going through that are keeping you from posting? Those are really hard. And I simply, at this point, forget that I have so many followers, and sometimes I don't maybe watch what I say or watch what I do, and I forget that people are watching. I have 70,000 people watching everything I do and say, and to me, I'm just a normal person, and so that's been hard for me to come to terms with.
You talked about, like, be careful about your mental health. What does it mean exactly?
Like separating from always being on my phone. So I had to disable all my notifications.
What are the risks?
I mean, there was a time when I had no desire to do anything anymore. Like, it was taking time away from the people in my life that I knew personally, to interact with people that I'd never met before. I think ego plays into it too. And then you hit that. I feel like often people who have such big growth in such a short time go through an experience that kind of changes their outlook on life. And I think for me, that was coming to the realization that I have a lot of privilege in my life, that prior to getting exposure to so many people, I had not realized, and I took for granted. And being more intentional about that, and actually being aware of these things has made me a better person, but it was hard at the time. It was really hard to go through being publicly called out for things, which I had a right to be called out for, but it's hard to go through these things in public, especially with so many people watching. And while I came out the other end a better person, it's really hard for you to go through these things as a human. We forget people are people at the end of the day. Like, it's easy to just say things on the internet.
Especially Twitter.
Yeah.
Twitter, like, it's short messages. Threads can go in all kind of direction. It's not.
Right.
It's one thread and people discussing and reading all the comments. They've
Right.
got one thread that can go that direction and the other in the other direction. Maybe people are not exactly reading the both threads.
Right.
And then you have to kind of be aware that you're not saying something that is open to interpretation.
Right.
But if you don't say something that is open, like if you're so precise, you need so much space to be able to describe what you're trying to say, right?
Yeah, so I think having to go through these experiences of learning about the fact that I am in a very privileged position was invaluable to me. But it was also very hard to deal with publicly. So I would say that's a downside of being on social media and having some sort of a following that we just don't discuss, is having to go through these experiences in front of thousands of people.
But like, I always wonder, your opinion is important now for people. It is, because there are so many followers that react to it and they follow you for a reason.
Yeah.
Do you feel that often you kind of end up without opinion, so that you don't, like, you try not to show your opinion or not to have an opinion at all, because it's so tricky to have an opinion when you're followed by 60, you have 60K followers? Or more, 70, whatever.
I don't think it's changed me having an opinion, but it has made me more conscientious of the fact that the way I explain these opinions is very important. I need to be more intentional with the language that I choose. I have to remember I also have a large international following, and so
context.
Yes, but it's also how different cultures communicate, and understanding that is really important. And someone giving me direct negative feedback is not necessarily them trying to be mean to me. It's just maybe how they communicate. So I think it's been a combination of watching how I communicate, and also at some point recognizing the fact that not everyone's going to agree with you, and that's okay.
Yeah.
And not necessarily reading every response or not taking it personally.
Right. But like, if you have that kind of like, maybe one of the things, like, okay, you see something. I mean, I see it as maybe one of the part of the problem is that something like someone comments, and you can't answer every single response, right? It's impossible. While doing your things that you need to do in your life, right? It becomes impossible. But then someone responds to you, and there's part of truth in what I'm saying, and this is the truth that you're debating about it in your head, and they say something that actually touches you because you're already debating all that, and maybe you think like, maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm right, and that person maybe has something inside it. How do you deal with this kind of situation where you're exactly unsure about what your opinion about?
So,
and you said something, and you still have maybe 10% of your brain thinking like, but maybe it's the other one.
Yeah, no, I think the biggest I'm not sure what the right word is, but one of the biggest hurdles that I had to get over was when I realized that there's a reason people say these things, and if they're angry, that means that they have emotion about it, and I should try to look at it from their point of view. So I typically try not to take these things to heart, because for me it's about learning why they feel this way, or why I am not acting the way that I should, and putting myself in their position. And I would encourage anyone who's going through difficult times not to get defensive, to take time to process what has just happened, because often there is truth in what people are saying, and you have to be not the bigger person, but you have to be able to get over your own pride to understand, why do they feel this way? Is there something I can learn from this? Am I wrong? If you're wrong at that point, you need to admit that, and there's no shame in admitting that. I think if you go through a public situation, you have two choices. One is to react immediately and get defensive, and that 110% of the time will never work. The second is to take time to process what has just happened, to see, is there an opportunity for me to learn, and to move forward, and just vow to be a better person. And if someone does something or says something outwardly rude to me or to someone else, the best thing that you can do is educate people. I think it's all about education. as opposed to just getting defensive or just, they're being mean and I don't like it. No, like try to see why they're saying these things. Is there truth in it?
But how about like and I know there are tricky questions and it's hard to answer these questions. But aren't they afraid sometimes that people will understand it as you lack confidence? Like, okay, for instance, you say something and then you understand that there are different angles to it, and maybe you should admit that you need to explore more the topics, or aren't you afraid that people will see it as like a lack of confidence or not having personality or these kind of things?
No, I think maybe a few, but I think empathy is more important.
Mm-hmm.
And personally, I'm secure in who I am, and
that's very important.
If people see that as me being unconfident, then that's their interpretation, and I can't change how they think. So I can only worry about how I think about myself.
Right.
Yeah.
And you like yourself being empathetic and understanding people more than I have opinions and I'm so sure about them.
Yeah, I like the person I am today. I will say this year was really hard on me for many reasons, and I don't like the way that I handled many situations, but I think I'm at the point now where I've gone through enough of them to understand who I want to be, and that's all I can encourage people to do, is figure out who you are and how you want to be, or who you want to be, before you just jump into all these reactions.
Right. And the other question is like, often, you're talking about some topic and you have some kind of subtlety in the way you're trying to discuss things, but then you get categorized or stereotyped into like, she is a white woman, or she is like this, and that's why you're talking about this. Whereas you have really a subtle thing that you're trying to kind of delicately express and communicate. But people often, this is a human mechanism, like to categorize people. This is the only mechanism we got to of thinking. You categorize things and put them into categories and all. Doesn't it bother you to be stereotyped or to be like categorized?
I think it used to, but I think I'm more conscientious of the fact that I am in a place of privilege based on how much money I make, the fact that I have a job, the fact that I get to travel, the fact that I'm white, all of these things, they all play into it. And before, like even a few months ago, I was ignorant to this fact, and I think it negatively impacted my ability to be who I want to be. So I think it used to bother me, but at the same time, I don't have the energy or the time to worry about what other people think of me. I can only be the best version of myself that's possible. And if I focus on that, there's no time left to worry about how others perceive me from a stereotyped perspective, if that makes sense.
Right.
I just need to be conscientious of the fact that I am in a place where I have it easier than some other people, and what can I do to help them as well?
But like, doesn't it mess with the communication? Whenever you talk, you need to kind of explain something, or like at least get people to understand what you're talking about, right? Is it more about like, okay, I should be clear enough so I make sure that the majority understands, and that's the best I can do? Is it that you're talking about?
Can you give me a specific situation?
Like, I don't know, you're trying to say an opinion about the framework or about the technology, and or about something that happened at work, and you are saying something that is and it's not related at all to you being, I don't know, a front end developer. Like you say, you're telling something about what happens in the back end. Imagine. But people say, "Oh yeah, of course, you're talking about this, about this way about backend because you're a front end and you hate backend, right?" And a lot of people understand your comment as you're being offensive to something that you're not, and that's why you're offensive, because you're not that thing, and you're trying to explain express a point that you're not allowed to express because you're not at the position to do it. This kind of thing.
I think what I've done previously is to not state my opinion as fact. I think that so often we do that. It's like, you have to do this if you want to be successful. You have to learn these things in this order if you want to do well. So being very intentional about that. Also stating the fact that this is my experience, or maybe this is my opinion because of these things. So maybe I don't like backend because I struggled with it a lot, and understanding these complex
and
topics.
Obviously we're talking about an example here. It's not your exact opinion about backend.
Right. So it's being aware of the fact that my experiences to date have had an impact on how I interact with technologies or things like that.
So it's coming from your experience, from
Correct.
your background, and it got you thinking about it in that particular way.
Right.
Another thing that comes to my mind, like how did that impact your interactions in real life? Like how do you interact with people in real life? I mean, obviously you said that you had to go through a period where you're all the time on the phone, but that's one of them. But now when you talk to people, did it help you delivering messages and interacting with people in real life, or does it have some kind of negative impacts, or both? Maybe
both. I think it's helped me get a more global view of how people communicate. I don't think I would have put as much priority on understanding different cultures and how to communicate effectively with them. So I do think that it's had positive implications in that respect. Obviously, there was a time when I wasn't putting as much effort into my personal relationships and I was more focused on social media. And I think the last several months, it's been more of a priority to have time for those things, but also separate it from personal life. On the flip side, people in my life who have watched this growth or just recently found out that, I have this, treat me differently. And that's really hard to have people close to you say...
Differently in what sense?
Like, oh, will you like my Instagram post so I'll get more followers? Or will you retweet me because, we're friends and I want more followers? And it's like, I think it really forces you to examine the quality of your relationships with people in real life once you start gaining an online presence, because I can't tell you how many times I've gone to, talk to friends or family, and they're like, oh, like you have a big following, like you're Twitter famous. And I despise nothing more than that, because I'm just a person and I'm just creating content. And yes, I have, thousands of followers, but that does not define me. And it's definitely opened my eyes to whether these people are in my life because they want to be there or because they want to be associated with that.
But people could do mistakes, right? They could ask you for that, and then they understand that, okay, this is not appropriate probably, or something like that. Some people could.
Generally, people don't, and I feel like I'm too nice to be too blatant with them about it.
But your way of talking, like, for instance, to your mom, did it change since?
No, not the people who I had quality relationships with, like, that were genuine. Yeah.
And like when you did this growth, and you have a blog post, and people could check that out. But one maybe final question about this topic. Were you watching followers growing, or were you just talking and things were like, oh yeah, more people following?
Yeah.
How did that happen? Did you have a goal, or what were you doing exactly?
In the beginning, I was numbers obsessed, absolutely, and I think that was a detriment to my to the quality of my relationships in real life, but also my mental health, because you're so focused on numbers. I don't believe in having follower goals for several reasons. One of which is, when you have a specific goal, whether that's weight loss number on a scale or whether that's number of followers, you will never feel satisfied when you hit that goal. The second is, if your main goal is to get followers, the quality of the followers in terms of how they interact with you is going to be surface level. I know many people who have tens of thousands of followers, but they don't get engagement on anything they do because they just cared about the numbers and they didn't care about whether people were there for the content. So I would say, it started out with me being like, oh my gosh, I'm almost at 10,000 now. Like, but over time, I stopped thinking about that. And I think that propelled my growth. It also helped me be more mentally healthy. So.
And it seems to be more often like people that succeed on and are followed on Twitter and social media. It's more about being a person, being yourself, because you can't make that thing up, right? You can't just act. I mean, some people do maybe, but people are often looking for genuine stories, for real people talking, right?
Yeah, and I think so often we only post the good and nothing of the bad. And I am more intentional now with the things that I put online, because I don't want all of my personal life broadcast. However,
go ahead.
I was just going to say, like, I feel like I'm decently good at admitting when things are not so good, and I think people see that and they can relate to it. So
as well. And do you have, like, this is truly the final question? Do you get annoyed sometimes at people telling you something related to your personal things, personal life, like for instance how you should dress, how you should do things, or like criticize something that is very personal that you think that it's your own zone, no one should be touching?
You mean online?
Yeah.
I haven't run into too many experiences like that personally. At the end of the day, we're judgmental creatures, and this again goes back to like I can't control how other people react. I can only control how I react. So the thing is, if I put it online, it's fair play to be criticized, and I understand that, and so that's I think why I'm more intentional now. Because while it's important to show the negative things that you're going through and the fact that you are human, there are some things I also want to just keep for myself.
Right.
So it doesn't bother me because if I post it, it's only fair that people can have an opinion. So.
Right. It's mostly useful stories or provoking stories, or what works with you for you? Just anything?
To post?
Yeah.
I think the fact that I share like my programming journey and how it hasn't always been easy, the struggles with maybe moving to a foreign country, not knowing the language, just
experience.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.